Hare Krishna. Welcome to this discussion on why fast. I'll talk about fasting in the context of yoga as well as in the context of our general life. So if we consider, what does yoga mean? Yoga means connection or harmony. And we achieve harmony with ourselves and with various aspects of ourselves through various means. One such means is fasting. Fasting can help us to come to a better level of harmony with ourselves, harmony with our body, our mind, and our souls. So in this session, I will talk about the benefits of fasting at the physical, mental, and spiritual levels. So let's look at the physical benefits of fasting. We as a society, or we could say as humanity, especially in the relatively progressed parts of the world, we get a lot of junk food. And not only do we get a lot of junk food, we also tend to eat a lot. So quite often, if we consider the body to be like a machine, then quite often we overwork the body. And just as every machine needs some downtime, our body also needs some downtime to rejuvenate itself. And fasting provides the downtime. So if we consider the body from that perspective of a machine, then actually fasting is good for the body. Quite often we think that, oh, I'm depriving my body and that I'm harming my body by that. But actually, rather than seeing fasting as deprivation of the body, we can see it as resting for the body. So the body has many functions to perform. But as long as we are putting food into the body, then much of its energy gets caught in digesting the food, processing the food, and assimilating some parts and excreting other parts of that food. So then much of the rebuilding, flushing, rejuvenating work that is there for the body, it never gets the time for doing it. So in that sense, fasting is a way of letting the body heal itself. And that's why in Sanskrit it says Langhanam Paramaushadham. That fasting is itself like a medicine. Many times in forests and other places, when animals get wounded, they just go to secluded place. They don't eat anything, just lie down and rest. So what happens by that is, naturally the body heals itself. Now, this is not universal for all animals, but it is an observation in some animals. In fact, if you look at today's world, there's a striking statistic that the WHO states that there are 1 billion people who are actually obese or nearing obesity as compared to 800 million who are undernourished. That means more people are at risk due to eating too much than they are at risk due to eating too less. At one level, some people might celebrate this because we have dealt with the problem of hunger and starvation and food shortage in such a way that we have more food to eat. Well, it's not entirely so, because there are many who don't get enough to eat, and overeating can also be a problem in its own way. So if we recognize that not all kind of eating is beneficial and not all kind of fasting is harmful. So the body is a machine and it needs to be operated appropriately. So what does that mean? Consider now, many people nowadays fast for a particular purpose, that is to lose weight. So because obesity has some significant health downsides, and also because obesity makes people look physically unattractive, and which is a heavy downside in people's social life. So many people try desperately to lose weight, and because of that there are different kinds of what are called as fasting fads, where people sometimes choose to fast one day and eat one day, or choose to fast severely for a week, or choose to fast for a large part of the day and take food only the rest of the day. So these are all ways in which fasting has to some extent come into vogue in the mainstream culture today as a tool for losing weight. Now that is fine. However, that's a unidimensional way of looking at fasting. When I say it's fine, what I mean is that yes, losing weight can be one result of fasting. Of course, some form of fasting can be unhealthy for the body also. But even if we assume that they are not that unhealthy, and one without harming the body loses weight, still fasting only for losing weight is like studying only to gain marks. Yes, gaining marks or grades in an exam is important. However, if one wants to become a professional in that particular subject in which one is taking the exam, then how much marks one gets alone is not important. How much one learns the subject so that they can work in that subject, that is also important. So similarly, just losing weight is not important. Gaining health is important. And so fasting, if it is done properly, can be a tool not just for weight loss but for health gain. And just like if a person really studies the subject well, then they're getting good marks, a natural byproduct of that proper study. Similarly, if we fast properly and improve our health overall, then naturally we will lose weight also. So fasting has far more holistic benefits, and that's why traditionally fasting is done with some amount of regularity and plan. So periodic fasting, for example, weekly, fortnightly, monthly, is something which is recommended within many spiritual traditions. And the fasting can also be at different levels. Some people fast entirely from basically taking nothing into the body. They may fast even from water. Generally, from a medical perspective, taking water is helpful because it keeps the body hydrated and it allows the body to flush out substances. So, some kind of juice fasts are also helpful because they can also help in cleaning and healing the bodies. But the idea is, with some kind of medical guidance, whether it is contemporary or conventional allopathic medicine or alternative medicines, if one has some serious problems, fasting can be a potent tool for healing. And even if we don't have any major health issues, fasting can be a way to improve our health. In one of the pyramids in Egypt, on the walls there is a saying written that on 1/5 of what you eat, you live on 1/5 of what you eat. On 1/4 of what you eat, and on the remaining 3/4 lives your physician. What that means is that actually we often eat too much, and that makes us sick. So sometimes eating less may well help us to become healthier. So these are the physical benefits of fasting. Now let's look at the mental benefits. By mental, what do we mean? It means in terms of emotions, desires, thoughts. So let's try to understand what is the mind. So we can compare ourself to a three-dimensional entity, say like a computer system. In a computer system, there's the hardware, the software, and the user. Like that, there is the body, the mind, and the self, the soul. So my body is like the hardware, the mind is the software, and we ourselves, the soul, are the user. Now, in the software, there can be various viruses that can come up, and if they come up, then they start harming the computer. So similarly, within our mind, various misconceptions can come up, and those misconceptions can hurt us. And just as removing viruses from a computer can make it function much better, so similarly, removing misconceptions from our mind can help us function much better. So what are the kind of misconceptions that can come in our mind? one basic mental misconception is to think that things which are secondary or tertiary are primary. In something which don't really matter much or don't matter at all, we think that they are all that matter. So for example, some kids may start playing video games, or some people may start just surfing social media, and they may get so caught in that they may have an important exam the next day, but they neglect it. So what has happened? Because of the mind's misconception, the mind starts thinking, this is what I want to do. This is what is urgent. I have to see this right now. So basically, the mind's misconception makes us believe that the things we don't need, that we need them very much. In fact, we need them far more than the things which we actually need. That's how the mind distorts our perceptions. So what can we do about this? Or how does fasting help us remove this misconception? One misconception is that we often think that we need more food than what we actually need. So what does fasting do? Fasting, it actually frees us from this misconception. It provides us freedom from this dependency. Now, we of course need food, but often we consume more food than what we need. So by fasting, when we fast, and we realize, hey, I can live without this much food, or at least for a whole day I can live without food. It's actually an empowering realization. We realize that the things which I consider indispensable, actually I can manage without them. Now, of course, we cannot live forever without food, but some of us, sometimes our mind makes us feel that if I don't eat this, I'm so restless, I just can't function at all. Sometimes the mind makes me feel that, oh, I'm going to faint, I'm going to die. The mind can go to any extremes in creating its illusions to further its agendas. So, when we resolve, okay, today is a fasting day, I'm going to fast. And then we stick to that resolution, then we realize, I thought that I need food every 3 hours, every 6 hours, and I realize I don't need it. So that is actually freeing the mind of this misconception, and it is empowering. So realizing that we are not as dependent on external things as we thought we were, that is empowering, and that is one benefit that comes from fasting. And while fasting from food is one thing, so we can, once we get that realization, we get that conviction, we can apply it for various things. Just as there can be physical detox, there can be digital detox. We may decide for the next few hours I'm not going to touch my phone. For this one day I'm going to off social media or whatever. So we can free ourselves from many other dependencies which our mind has created for us by realizing through fasting that we don't have to be dependent on such things. And then more additionally, it's not just that we can free ourselves from unhealthy or unnecessary dependencies, but additionally, we can also cultivate positive virtues through fasting. What are those? For example, gratitude and compassion. There are many people in the world who have to sleep hungry every day. In fact, according to some statistics, 1 out of every 4 child in the world sleeps hungry. And so it's so painful, it's so heartbreaking in one sense. And we take food so much for granted. So by temporarily placing ourselves in the position of those who are regularly in that position. Many people don't have food, and if we abstain from food, we are putting ourselves in a similar situation. By that, what can happen? We can feel more grateful. We can be grateful that we have the facility where we can get regular meals, and we can also become more compassionate toward others who are going through those difficulties. So these are both gratitude and compassion are invaluable virtues that can help us in various aspects of our life journey. And both of them can be cultivated if we practice fasting in a contemplative mode. In not just, okay, I want to lose weight or I want to prove how self-controlled I am, but we just use that to expand our consciousness. So that is the benefit at the mental level. Now, beyond that, what about at the spiritual level? At the spiritual level, we understand that we are spiritual beings. We are essentially non-material. So although we understand that we are non-material beings, and we can study wisdom texts like the Bhagavad Gita, which explain our non-material essence. So by philosophical analysis, we can get intellectual understanding of this or theoretical understanding of this. Okay, there is a non-material core to me, and that is the actual me. That's good as far as understanding goes, but we also want practical realization. So how do we get that? Through disciplined abstinence. So for example, if we are not just fasting, but we are simultaneously cultivating doing spiritual activities, raising our consciousness to the spiritual level, then what happens? Something very special happens. Normally, we get some pleasure from eating food, or we can say at least when we feel distress, we get relief from distress by eating food. But sometimes when we practice spiritual life and try to raise our consciousness to the spiritual level, and we are fasting, so what happens? Although we are deprived physically, because we are connected spiritually, we start experiencing a non-material enrichment, and that is extraordinary. That helps us realize the spiritual stuff is real. So that's how we start realizing, actually I am a spiritual being, because I'm experiencing this happiness which is not coming at a material level. So now there are different forms of yoga. We practice bhakti yoga, and in bhakti yoga, when we fast, it is in a particular philosophical context. We understand that we are parts of a whole bigger than ourselves. We are parts of an all-attractive Supreme Krishna. And as parts of Krishna, we are meant to link with Him. And that connection of the part with the whole brings satisfaction. Just like when the hand satisfies the belly, the hand also gets satisfied. So, in Bhakti Yoga, the basic principle is, the more we connect with Krishna, the more we relish non-material enrichment. And for relishing the non-material enrichment, what happens? Fasting can be an impetus. So what happens is, we use physical deprivation as an impetus for intensifying our devotional absorption. That means if we start feeling inconvenience, if we start feeling discomfort at the physical level, initially if we feel that, and if we dwell on it, then we will become more and more agitated. But if instead of dwelling on it, we direct our consciousness toward the spiritual level. We try to absorb ourselves in Krishna. Then not only will we become free from that dissatisfaction, but we'll also start experiencing higher satisfaction. That's why among yogis, fasting is not just something we do for practicing abstinence at the body level, but along with that abstinence, we also try to maximize our devotional activities. So for example, we may chant some sacred mantras, the holy names of Krishna more. We may study the sacred texts in the Bhagavad Gita more. We may pray more. So in this way, we provide our consciousness more and more channels to go to the spiritual level. And thereby, we experience non-material enrichment. And that's how what happens. So Bhakti Yoga helps us to rise to the highest level of yoga. Yoga means connection, and complete connection of our heart with the divine heart. That happens when we are absorbed in Krishna. And then thus what happens, if fasting becomes an impetus for that, then we understand that absorption will lead to satisfaction. The more I am absorbed in Krishna, the more I will be satisfied. And to conclude, what happens is that non-material that temporary physical fasting if it leads us to become more and more absorbed in Krishna, then it leads to eternal spiritual feasting, because the soul becomes connected with the whole, becomes connected with Krishna, becomes absorbed in Krishna, and that gives the ultimate satisfaction. So thus, physical fasting can lead to spiritual feasting. So to summarize, why do we fast? In yoga, yoga is meant to connect or harmonize, and fasting can help us become harmonized at the physical, mental, and spiritual levels. At the physical level, we stop the overworking of the body through overeating, and we promote health, not just weight loss, but health gain by giving the body the rest time when it can rejuvenate itself. And generally, rather than random fasting, if regular disciplined fasting is there, that's much more helpful for the body to heal itself and strengthen itself. Then at the mental level, fasting helps us realize that we don't have to be as dependent on food as we think we are, and that way it can free us from many other unhealthy dependencies also. That the mind is like the software, the body is the hardware, and the soul is the user. So one of the major viruses in the mind is that things which are secondary or tertiary, we think they are primary. And fasting helps us realize that such unhealthy dependencies are unnecessary. And then at the spiritual level, fasting is meant to give us an impetus to raise our consciousness to the spiritual level. And especially in Bhakti Yoga, when we focus our consciousness on the all attractive Supreme Krishna and use the physical discomfort of fasting as an added impetus to intensify our absorption in Krishna, then the temporary physical fasting can become the doorway to eternal spiritual feasting, because we become attracted to Krishna, we become absorbed in Him to ultimately